Late today. Sorry about that. Had to take a bio break. You know how it goes. If you're a person of a certain age, you gotta pinch a loaf, maybe suffer from the Hershey squirts, whatever the case may be. Let's get into more tabletop role playing game things. All right, welcome to RPG with DBJ. I am your host, DBJ. Today we are not talking about scatological humor. Today we are going to talk about monsters. And Monster Monday has been the norm here. I know a number of you are brand new to the channel. Normally, we go 5 days a week. We have Monster Monday, and then each day we have a different subsection of the show. We try to keep the theme throughout the week. Anyway, you'll get used to it, but I thought we'd get back to some of the fundamentals. And so today we're going to talk about reskinning on this Monster Monday. Now, of course, um, oh man, hey Z, what's going on there? Zamara says, "I am not sure what I will have to say to add to this discussion." "Quote: I will say while I write several new monsters into existence through multiple different systems." Exactly. Not sure. For those who do not know, those who participate in the show on YouTube and Twitch are basically the co-hosts of the show because I can be an idiot sometimes. But in the beginning, I like to um, it, have an open discussion, even a kind of a debate about a thing. And I dare say, uh, maybe this day, this hour, this minute, that one of the best tools that we can have as creators in the tabletop role playing game experience is to learn how to reskin anything and everything. Reskinning, it just takes imagination. It doesn't take money. It might take a little bit of time. We might burn a few brain cells as our brain heats up from the overclocking, but I think it's one of the best. Now, could I be argued in the next couple of minutes that there's another tool that's the best? Of course. But let's explain and define what reskinning is, because I would dare say that most people are doing it in the tabletop community more often than a little bit, but that it may only be in one section or one area of a particular role playing game you're using. Sometimes we feel like we only have permission to reskin one part, but not another part. So reskinning is essentially um, erasing the serial numbers off of the mechanics of the system that you're using, Dungeons and Dragons and whatever. And you're reducing it down to its very bare bones, like taking a home and the construction workers remove everything, the drywall, everything. They strip it down to the bare minimum to then relayer the interior or even the exterior of the home, making it something brand new, updating it, making it more beautiful, correcting a mistake, and yet it still retains its same volume and shape and purpose, but we're reusing it. And here are some techniques that, or maybe even stages that you can do to reskin something, and then retroactively go, "Oh, I know what that is." Also, this when I say it's cheap, oh no, we're not going to do that, Druid Fuzz. Oh, you get yourself killed. One of our co-hosts is yeah, there's certainly more than one way to skin a cat. Yeah, we don't want to. Yeah, or basically any other animal, right? Yeah, in the TTRPG community, cats are like cats are like familiars, right? Like they get to play with the dice, they get to lay on the battle mats, they get to put their bunghole in front of cameras over and over again. They get to sit on laps and be in front of listen, listen, don't threaten the cats in the tabletop RPG community. Uh, they are the ultimate game masters. We just haven't figured it out yet that they're in control. So, it being Monster Monday, one of the best ways to surprise your players, because we've and I'll give you some examples. I've mentioned some of them on the channel before, but um, one of the best ways to do this is to rename or recategorize the monsters in your world. An example would be that a village people call all the other monsters on the other side of the hill. They call them goblins, right? They're all goblins. They're all demonic. They're all lizard people. And then this is basically reskinning. You take whatever kind of monsters you want and you throw them at the party. Now the party might go, well, wait a minute. The villagers kept calling them goblins. I You're describing a troll. And you, as the dungeon master, game master, something, is like, no, the people call them goblins. They're goblins, right? It's like, yeah, but it's like 7.5 feet tall, and every time I slice it, it begins to heal. And you, as the dungeon master, are like, sure, but the folk call them goblins. So one way to reskin something is to place those creatures in within the folklore of the world, and just let the people call them whatever they are, right? Like if the people see snake scaled individuals, they might call them snake folk. Now, could they be lizard men, or could they be yuan-ti or nagas or dragonborn or whatever? Sure, but within the world, your world, the folklore, that's what they call them. Okay. Another way to reskin is not just within the folklore, but maybe in your own world, they just have different names. So, for example, we're going to get into this when we get into World Building Wednesday, when we openly start creating, and you guys are going to help create. I don't want to get into too much detail because we'll do it with World Building Wednesday, but essentially, like you can come up with brand new names for the monsters that are already existing in your world. So, for example, let's say you want to add in blink dogs. Blink dogs could be anything from, you could call them misty doggos, you could call them shadow coyote, maybe even uh, sneaky hyenas. I don't know. All kinds of things. Cloud hounds. I mean, you come up with all kinds of crazy new names for the things that already exist in your world. Maybe they're not ogres. Maybe they're beast men or something like that. So just giving a brand new name uh, without having to change the mechanics too much. Another way of reskinning something is to change its origin, and by changing the origin, you change the nature of the thing. So, for example, ogres might be giant folk, or close to Neanderthal or Neanderthals that exist out in the wild. But what if they're created because of a curse that somehow, some way, some witch was punished in a city, and various people from a certain bloodline, maybe the Winteger bloodline or something, had killed this witch and all her folk, her coven, and she's cursed the Winteger bloodline, and eventually, at some point, each and every member begins transforming into ogres, and maybe the Wintegers are very powerful members of the city, but people fear them, and no one knows why they fear them. But eventually, they turn ogres. Well, maybe there's members of this family that are innocent and had nothing to do with the curse. So origins can change things. Curses, infections, um, uh, creatures from their origin. They are from another world. They've been mutated. They made a promise for power. They are. It is lycanthropic. Maybe it's a part of an initiation or a magic school, or what normally in the you flip the origin of the thing that exists within the thing. Like, for example, in mythology, dragons were considered the living embodiment of greed. Who's to say that the dwarven king doesn't become a dragon because of his or her greed, up in the mountains or something, and the dragon king becomes a, a massive dragon, and his queen, just as greedy and jealous or something, goes over to the other mountain, in the Five Kings mountain, and she becomes a dragon. And it's like, well, we've got to defeat the dragon, but one of the ways to defeat the dragon is to know what the dragon wants, and that maybe they used to be humanoid of some sort. So origins have a lot to do with it, and origins may be the key to eradicating that self same thing. Vampirism has had different origins throughout folklore. Sometimes it's been like spitting in the face of the gods or something and been punished. Some are, blood transfer. We know the common bitten by a vampire, then the vampire feeds you a little bit of blood. It could be through magic rituals, and those rituals could be undone, et cetera, et cetera. So taking a common monster or common encounter and go, you know what, let's twist that up. Is in the world, do monsters come about because of human behavior, like greed or violence or cowardice or something, and slowly and surely that person transforms into that particular creature, maybe, or maybe even um, eating a particular fruit or something like that, any kind of thing. Jude says, as someone who despises bioessentialism, I've never been a fan of how D&D or many other TTRPGs handle any beings. Yeah, and sometimes I think we pigeonhole ourselves. As humans, we like things simple. So once a simple explanation has been given to something, we kind of stick with that and do become a quite a bit bioessential. And also this can create a number of conundrums that maybe we might have some fun with, right? We've seen the shape change lycanthrope uncontrollable being, but that person is innocent, right? That person, the innocent, the evil family, but they have the innocent family members, young or whatnot, and they're like, I don't want to transform and kill people. And so how, do the player characters just slaughter the innocent person who's been afflicted, or do they find a cure? That kind of thing. We've seen this in ghost stories, right? We've seen evil ghosts that are horrible and wretched beings that would just want to mutilate and cause insanity, or they're the ghosts who are like begging to be exorcised. And the same could go for just about any number of monsters. Now origins also might have time limits. Player characters might not be able to defeat said monster, but given a time limit, maybe the sun comes up, maybe it happens over the course of 101 days, maybe it happens when a particular season happens or a particular event. If the two shall never meet and the two fall in love, and when they meet, boom, the curse happens. So what happens, you got to separate the two, whoever the two are, to be happily married or best friends or whatever. Two armies shall join. And so circumstance could also create something as well. So Mara says that is fair. My way of handling it is by leaning into the differences or making every race human, but a different culture. Exactly. And again, we could, various, what's the term? I can't think of the term off the top of my head, but there's a parallel creation is a real thing where you can go around the world, and various cultures have the same fears, same dragon like monstrosities in their cultures, it created in a parallel system. So various cultures, like one culture may have a pretty good relationship with the lizard folk that live out in the swamp, whereas another culture, they absolutely despise them. And it could be through circumstance, maybe as recent as a local war or scavenging, or it could be in the past. People who have learned to hate because they've just been taught to hate. They don't really know why they hate, they're just told to. uh, let's look in today's world, right? Being told that you should hate or despise something even though you don't know why. It's just because your parents did and your community does, and well, you're expected to feel the exact same way, right? um, Now moving on to other ways to reskin something, giving it a different name, giving it a different origin, is to, well, literally take its skin off and reskin the thing. So an ogre doesn't have to look like a Neanderthal, chin jutted, head hunched over, scratching its butt or something like that with a club. Maybe an ogre using the changing its name and changing its appearance. Maybe an ogre is in this particular community, maybe they're like gladiators. They're given a concoction and they just become like roided out, six packs plus like the 12 pack on the side with the handles, kind of like, you know, chicks with thick thighs and muscles and just like, "Arr," and maybe they're just like roided out they're not necessarily mindless, but they're like competitors in a paragon conflict kind of gladiatorial arena. And when they take this concoction, they're just ultimately changed, and from then on, they're just brutal individuals. But they have like the glistening skin. Their body equilibrium is equaled out, where people are like, yeah, they're like fans of them. They're like, yeah, that's my favorite competitor. And but outside the arena, they're still brutal and controlled by their emotions and controlled by their desires. And maybe that makes them very dangerous or something. An ogre could also be, uh, if you start changing, let's use Dungeons and Dragons as our example. There are monstrous types: aberrants, giants, humanoids, plants, oozes. What are some more? Fae, celestials, fiends, and such. Just change the mechanical origin of it, and then it becomes something even further away from what someone expects. So, and I'm using ogre because it's one of the simplest stat blocks I can think of. Ogres, owlbears are real simple. A couple of the giants are real simple without having to go too far into what it is. But again, imagine an ogre as a construct. Imagine an ogre as a dragon or aberrant creature or something, right? And eventually, you, you 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 start saving money from having to buy a lot of monster books and start surprising your player characters. Like a fiendish troll might be completely different than an aberrant troll-like monster that heals, which may be completely different than a troll construct that has self-repair mechanisms or something, which might be completely different than a fey troll. And of course, you're saying, well, is it going to always be called a troll? No, let's go back to number one. Let's change the name of it, and then change its origins, and then those kind of things. Like maybe a trollish construct gets his arm cut off, and it picks the arm back up and sticks it back on its body and continues to ravage people. Right? Undead is another great one that you can layer over damn near everything. We know that one of the most famous ones is a Draco Lich, an undead dragon, but you can make pretty much anything undead. Something that's aberrant, of course, could be, I don't know, a leech like monster adheres to the neck and skull of human beings that starts pumping into it endorphins that starts making its body roided out like Bane from the Batman comics. And so they become like these like mindless, brainless kind of beings or something like that. So reskinning is an excellent tool. Remember, if you're not changing the mechanics, or you're not changing the mechanics too far, reskinning is top notch. Now you can get to some troubles. We're going to get into a little bit of troubles here as we start tweaking the mechanisms, but renaming something, changing its origin, and then literally changing its skin. Making something aquatic having a different skin type or environmental type. Bugbears in the winter might look just like yetis. Um, Lizard folk in the desert might have like a brown skin, like sidewinder snakes or something like that, so on and so forth. Let's see. Okay, so Michael says, which are like folk horror elements. I love those. Like, can only be defeated when. Like, for example, if we take folklore, I'm going to pull shit out of my ass on this one. Folklore can be things like um, leaving out curdled milk because it's drawn to it. Usually, like fruits, veggies, baked goods have been a very popular thing in folklore that can distract or convince or disrupt fey creatures and things, leaving things on doorsteps or leaving an offering of some sort, even sacrificial offerings, which can be a little problematic for some table groups. But there is the idea of sacrificing something to a monster out in the unknown. There's also song and dance can be a thing. Human sacrifice is another thing that can waylay some of the folklore. There are also um, fey promises that have been broken, where a maybe a bloodline or family or town made a promise to some creatures or fey creatures in the wild, and when those promises are broken, they're like, hey, do this for us and we're at peace, but you break your promise, we're taking your firstborn, right? And And what air quotes monster becomes of that can be up to you. It doesn't You don't have to only reserve yourself to creatures that in the book say fae. For example, using the folklore. There's also a lot of folklore like sprinkling of salt, can't cross running water, um, um, pennies over coins over the eyes of the dead so that they can move on and pay Karen. It's instead of them turning into undead. Like death rites are a big thing for undead. Like a person's soul must be accounted for to cross over. Otherwise, in a fantasy world, maybe this is an automatic you become undead unless your life is not uh, completed, or I don't know what's another way. Specific words of contrition are spoken over the body, and if not, they become undead, or something even worse. As Mars says, when I'm in there, after having skinned it off, sometimes I like to change a bit of the muscles as well. Give that goblin a higher con and strength compared to their companions, and a magic sword. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And here's an this isn't really reskinning, but it's like it's the contextual part of it. Like if you just modify the stats of a creature, and let's mechanically go through it, right? So Zamar brings up a good point. It says like sometimes I like to change a lot of the bit of the muscles as well, like give that goblin a higher con and strength compared to their companions, making something a little stronger, a little faster, heck, even a little more intelligent or perceptive, like wisdom, like common sense or instincts. Just increasing that little thing, that little bit can make the difference between, oh, is it just mindless or does it have a true intelligence to it? Heck, even charisma, even though that might be kind of rare, maybe the monster has allies and is, or maybe the monster is through the population, maybe it is desired. Like the difference between we could compare humanity and lupines, dogs, wolves, that kind of thing from around the world. Humans and dogs have had this intrinsic relationship with each other, and there are scientists that have studied this to the point where have we domesticated dogs or have dogs domesticated us for their own survival, right? Maybe there's a monster out there like vampires that actually look good. So socially we think one is better than the other. It's like people who are protect animals in the environment because they look good, even though they, like rabbits or eagles or something. But it's like, who are the people protecting leeches and cockroaches and ants and fungus and things like that, right? Like you don't see too many people going like, "Don't kill the roaches," right? Yeah. Yeah, Zamara says, and thus you get things like tieflings. See, in my head canon, in my world, tieflings are fey related. They have no relationship to fiends. In my world, they're related to like satyrs and fey creatures like that, and I allow my players to alter them fey wise, that kind of thing. Mike says I've run desert lizard folk who burrow into the sand and through the sand instead of swim. Yep, and fully support environmentally altered variants. Yeah, see, Gang of One, and I should pull that fucking book out. Yeah, and Out of the Box Adventures. Yeah, the so using the environment to shape your monsters, even urban environments, really works really well. I mean, you all you have to do is pick a random monster, pick the environment they would normally survive in, and then if you can't think of that, think of any animals. I mean, taking animals and twisting them into your monsters is excellent. I mean, swamps and crocodiles fit together really well. Take a crocodile, flip it on top of any other, like, flip it on top of an ogre, and there you have yourself a roided out lizard folk, right? It's the exact same thing. And then now we're going to get into some of our little mechanical tweaks, like swimming through sand instead of water, snow swimming. I like for Arctic creatures, like they don't dig through the dirt, but they can swim through uh, snow. They can easily stand on ice. Creatures that have camouflage, where if they're still, you really can't see them. In the forests or swamps, maybe they have moss or leaves growing on them, or they make their own ghillie suits to blend in, et cetera, et cetera. It's very easy. Yeah, Mike says, yeah, these can be inserted easily as a cultural aspect as well. Like uh, the fact that wolves blend into the environment isn't their fault. Owls and things like that. It's just that's just biological. But if they're intelligent, maybe they make themselves blend in. They apply something to their skin that makes them blend, or they again the ghillie suit idea. They weave these big cloaks that allow them to hide in the woods and such, and they remain still. Ah, okay. Mike says, I played in Eladrin and really pushed the Fey connection to milk, sweets, and compulsions. Ooh, I like that. I like that a lot. um, the Fey, there is a lot of connection to Fey creatures and the hearth, like milks and sweets and promises and what is it, laying out milk and cookies or something, and the little gnomes will like clean your house for you or something. Elf on the shelf and all. There's a lot of that. I mean, it all blends together after a while in my head canon, but yeah. Mm-mm-mm. Yeah, Z says I agree with Mike. In the same way with bullywugs, instead of swamp kings, make them mountain kings. Let them live and control the top of the waterfall. Absolutely. As a matter of fact, what we've seen how dryads have been. Uh, there are different names of dryads, but basically they're just reskinned versions of the exact same fey seductress, um, but in a different environment. Like instead of a dryad with a tree, you have the nereids in water. There's ones for mountains, I think, with the earth, et cetera, et cetera. Hey Cam, what's going on? Whatever. What's up? Mike says I made an aquatic tiefling species who are related to the old gods instead of fiends. Thus, you get Thullings, tiefling plus Cthulhu. Ooh, Thullings. I like that. I like that a lot. Yeah, 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 yeah. Fellings. But yeah, but exactly. Change the origin, changes the nature. I love it. Drudfuzz says if an animal has domesticated us, then those have clearly been the cats. You're not wrong. Cats are like, why should we have to go hunt for like mice and stuff? We could just sit on warm laps or, you know, sleep on their chests when the human's chest when they're asleep. That's nice and warm too. Meow a little bit, get fed. Boy, they open up those metal cans and give us food. Why should we have to? Exactly. Mm-mm-mm. Cam says in 3.5 math, how would you measure over 1,000 pounds of bite force? You don't. you, that's a rabbit hole of trying to bring real world statistics into not nearly simulationist kind of things. Like, for example, why the only reason a dagger does D4 is because it's smaller than a short sword, which does D6, which is smaller than a long sword, which does D8. Right? It wasn't logic in a with physics. It was we've got different size dice and we need to do different types of damage. Let's just apply that, right? And then now today we just go, oh yeah, oh, sure, that's just what it is. Mike says I've used different dryads based on different types of trees, and went further uh, regarding the summer and gloaming courts of dryads. Summer court might blossom as an emotional response, whereas gloaming might grow thorns and thorns or ash. Oh, absolutely. I even had dryads that would change based on the conditions of forests. So, like a burnt out forest, the dryad was like all ashen colored, close to being undead, with like other dryads. Well, in the encounter I made up was there were dryads and then there were wraiths, and the wraiths were from the disease destroyed, burnt out forests. So instead of using like um, instead of them being seductresses, they had like ash and smoke and embers swirling around people, confusing them and such. It wasn't like charming as in, oh, I feel good. It was more like, cough, 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 hack, hack, hack. I can't see anything but the burning farce around me and fires and stuff. So yeah. Okay, so let's get into some mechanical things where we start changing them. For number one, size. Small, medium, large. Just change size as you see fit. Be careful of minimizing or maximizing stats. Something else is I think often is ignored are the hit points and armor class of a creature in Dungeons and Dragons. The armor class, you could bump that up and down 2, 3 points as you will, making something or uh, tougher or injured or circumstantial, right? The creature is diseased, so I can only give it 10% of its own hit points. It is weaker. It's a weaker member, a younger member of its kind, so it has less hit points, less armor class. Maybe you take away. It's got 3 special capabilities. You take one of those away. Maybe you take away one of its attacks. Maybe it's got 3 attacks. You only give it 2. It could be lost. It could be lost, young, elderly, wounded, diseased, cursed, poisoned, uh, that kind of stuff. Now go the opposite direction. It is a chieftain, leader, elite, prime, zenith, paragon form of itself, right? Like an ogre from the fiendish netherworld, and you're using an ogre as a frontline troop might have its maximized hit points, a +2 armor class, and maybe an extra 10 feet of movement, right? Maybe an extra attack, or it does an extra die of whatever normal damage it does, or something like that. So now when you start changing its mechanics, you're going to have to throw the CR out the window. And we all know CR is trash in 5th edition. Let's just let's just be honest with ourselves in terms of people who are like, well, how do I balance the encounter if I change its abilities? You weren't able to balance it in the first place, so whatever, right? But um, so yes, you will change its ultimate CR out of a system that doesn't really know its own CR system. So that is a thing, but changing its movement speed, its movement type, flying, digging, climbing, maybe it has a unique movement. We talked about swimming through sand, swimming through snow. It is unaffected by movement through tight spaces such as the Underdark or mountainsides and climbing or dense jungle or what have you. Maybe it's amphibious; it can hold its breath underwater in a swamp-like area, much like crocodiles and dolphins and things of that nature. Who you know, there's a lot of those real life animals that actually don't breathe water; they just hold their breath. Infinitely much longer than us mere mortals that walk on the earth, right? And so if the creature can hold his breath for 20 minutes, 20 minutes is essentially infinite in terms of encounter types. So that may be a thing as well. But now we could go on to damage types. Maybe a fiendish ogre adds, or you switch out some fire damage for its bludgeoning attack, right? Maybe it carries a big stone club, and it's like it's carved. It's not even like ripped from the wall. It's like carved with runes or something, and then the ogre just grabs it. And all of a sudden, it like fire spews through the runes carved in this stone bludgeoning club. And so instead of doing 3 die 6 bludgeoning damage, it does 2d6 plus a d6 of fire. Or maybe you just want to keep maximizing its damage, add a couple of more dice onto its damage potential: ice, fire, cold, thunder, uh, psychic damage, those kinds of things. Truth Fuzz is, I hate that different types of damage for various weapons. If I ever make some OSR type game, I would assign every weapon a d6 and then make them different through other tags. The OSR has always done that, and to this day does it. As a matter of fact, there are plenty of OSR games like OSR style games. The first one that comes to mind is the ICRPG that's gotten a lot of attention, and essentially you do damage based on your character type, not the weapon type. So a warrior class maybe in your game does die 10, whereas more of the skill monkey type classes do d8, and maybe the more intellectual or magical or arcane creatures in your character concept in your world only do a d4. And that in that way, doesn't matter if you carry a dagger or a spear or a polearm or a flail. If you're a martial character, you can be a badass with a dagger, and you like a movie trope or a book trope or comic book, graphic novel, television. Usually, it's not always the bigger weapon is the best weapon. It's the skill of the person, so you could differentiate it that way. And then uh, Equipment tags. ICRPG does that as well. Equipment tags. It's piercing. It's bludgeoning. It and then it might not even be damage type. It might be like what effect it has. Like a hammer also knocks a person down. A slicing weapon also causes them to continue to bleed. A piercing weapon would probably be the same way, but whatever. You get what I mean. Zamar says, I feel like there are enough different types of weapons that it's pointless to try and state them all. In fact, I agree that tags and weapon abilities are the correct way to create new gear. Yeah, sometimes though, and this isn't you, but sometimes those of us in the gaming community attach numerical statistics on things that probably don't deserve it. A katana is a perfect example of a longsword from a different culture, but because of our own pseudo mythological opinion of, say, samurai, we think katanas are like worlds above and beyond a longsword, and more likely than not, the game system doesn't have space for that. It's probably the practitioner. Like just because a spear is used differently than a halberd doesn't necessarily mean they have to be completely different weapons. I'm actually kind of disappointed spears aren't like a spear. Other than like a dagger, a spear's probably the most dominant weapon from in society over the number of years than any other weapon before firearms. Like, and when I say firearms, talking crossbows, bows and crossbows, like a fired, launched, non-muscle powered style launch kind of thing. I think spears probably would be more dominant than swords, but swords were metal, so you know whatever. You get into all kinds of arguments of which weapon is best. But there's what is it, Skolodaria? What's the guy's? You guys know the YouTube channel that goes through um comparing and contrasting different types of medieval style weapons and such. So yeah, you can always do that. Um, which I like to default to player character abilities. I'm like, I'd rather a player be badass than have to worry about the weapons. Then because it automatically means that players automatically pick the best option, and it might not work in your headcanon for your world. Cameron says, "Does Sunder work against a bare-fisted monk, or is that a called shot?" Yeah, yeah. I get it. Yeah. Can you sunder or disarm a monk? uh, I don't know. I call it a called shot if you want to like disrupt or paralyze someone's arm or something like that. I always do that for my monsters. If somebody gets a crit hit on a monster, I let them eat. You could do double damage, or you can get some kind of other effect, like slice through their wing, cut off their tail. You blind an eye. You stick something in their mouth. You pin their wing to a wall. You slice through one of their claws, or like I do that kind of stuff. Yep. Michael says there's like 2 or 3 page outline in the DMG which outlines how a monster type changes ability scores, etc. So you could apply the zombie template to whatever. Yeah. Here's the most common book never read. It details that kind of stuff in here by and literally in the monster manual, it's like, oh, here's how DMs should be free to modify creatures' abilities. And yet people were just like, I don't know how to. I need to buy another monster book to modify a creature. And you don't have to. You can give creatures as many. You can give them as many abilities that you see fit as needed. If you want to have that ogre from the fiendish world, um, lit by fire, and anyone that comes within his 5 foot square suffers damage because it's on fire, and it doesn't, and it's immune to fire, feel free to do that. If you want to make the lizard folk even closer to dragonborn and just give them like a breath weapon or resistance or immunity to some kind of thing or whatever, feel free to do it. You want to give special magic items or equipment or some other capabilities to any kind of sentient style creature, like those same lizard folk carry around with them poisons and knockout gases and their own versions of magic items that are reskinned for what they have. Like, for example, they have a pouch of, I'm going to call them like army ants or something. When they throw the pouch, the ants come scurrying out of the pouch and they latch themselves onto a player character that like is the equivalent of a web spell or whole person spell or something like that, sure. If you notice, I reskinned the web spell by making it like army ants or something that are flung at PCs, right? But reskinning isn't just related to monsters, but today's Monster Monday, so I thought we'd talk about that. Mike says, and I played D&D long enough. Oops, here we go. Says I played D&D long enough uh, um, ago to say that I've done the everything does D6. Yep. And our table hated it. I'm a weapon nerd. There's zero chance a dagger does the same damage as a bardiche or a poleaxe. I hear you. And mind you, listen, for those who've read the original Dungeon Master's Guide, and I'm talking like Gygax era, there were probably 30 different pole arms, all with slightly different weapon speeds, damages, capabilities. I mean, School of Gladiatoria. There it is. School of Gladiatoria. Is that that's the school? I mean, that's the website. Yeah. Damn. That is the content creator on YouTube that does the compare and contrast the weapons through the ages and what they were used for, whether they were good for like mounted or armored individuals and things like that. One-on-one combat versus like siege warfare and all those kind of things. Yeah. Mike brings up a point and say, I mean, Zamara brings up a point with Mike that says, I've seen it. The issue is that they don't give any real templates to keep in mind and then give certain strange types of creature types, making it almost useless. I think if I'm not incorrect, that basically they're saying, oh, hey, you can change what you want, but they don't give a great framework to go, here's an example. Here are like 5 examples of changing a thing run wild, because they say, oh, you can change a thing, and then they don't. Like an example, perfectly reasonable example would be to alter creatures based on environment and say, hey, creatures in the Arctic realm might have these things: resistance to cold, camouflage because of like having a white outer ivory white outer layer that blends in, and maybe some other they don't have to make rolls when it comes to slipping and falling and climbing or something like that. And they could do that for like 6 to 10 different environments: coastal, aquatic, coastal, mountain, plains, desert, blah blah. But the reason why they don't do that is because monster books sell. They're one of like the top 3 sexiest things. Player options, monster books, magic items. Like those are probably your top 3. Sexy dragons. Dragons are another big one. Top 4. So you know, Zamar agrees with me with the thing. And although Mike says, like Zamar says, also, you're slightly wrong. In my opinion, a dagger can cut through skin the same as a sword, and a thick spear pierces like a poleaxe. The difference is skill or defense and attack. And then Mike says, the daggers are not great cutters. I could get really newly over why, but I assure you, weapons are not equals, not even close. But it depends. Now, the problem is, like Dungeons and Dragons is a terrible system to incorporate simulationism, because it starts to divergently outpace other things. So like you could get noodly with weapons, but Dungeons and Dragons is a bad for you might want to do something like, is it Rune Quest? GURPS is good for that. Um shit, yeah. It's all that. Scala, you could also try Scalagrim. That's the other channel. Yep. Yeah, Mufo brings it up. Yeah, Scalagrim and Scullo are are 2 of my longtime favorites. They got me into finally trying Hema. Yep. Hema is historical European martial arts. Yep, 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 yep. Absolutely. And unfortunately, what ends up happening is that weapons are like an arms race. So, like for example, 2 people stand across from each other with like bladed weapons, and maybe the longer bladed weapon is better than a shorter one. Then the curved one might be better at getting through armor because the other person starts using armor, and then someone else gets another weapon to get rid of of a shield and things like that. So weapons have always been an arms race, and what happens is a weapon can be, like, for example, a hook on the back of a hammer allows someone to, say, hook a shield away and then bash hard armor. So it becomes the new noodly thing, which then becomes less useful when, I don't know, mounted riders come into it, right? And then things like that, like, oh, piercing weapons are good except through hard armor. Now I need a way to pierce through the hard armor to get to the thing to use a slashing weapon, and it's all that kind of stuff. So everyone thinks that their choice is the best based on the circumstances. And then, of course, what ends up happening is, how much does it cost to make that weapon? How many of those weapons were given to armies to end up having see that weapon, which means that more people were trained with that weapon who found it, and then so on and so forth, right? Cost has a lot to do with it. Skill in making the weapon, the resources, how much wood and what kinds of wood, what kinds of metals were around, what kinds of skills to make those metals, and then you get on to, like, um, how many armies had people have to buy their own weapons? So then you have that kind of thing. So yeah, yeah, yeah. There's all that kind of stuff. Yep. But Zamars is possibly, but I like that each classification of weapon has variations to it, such as a rapier, a falchion, a flamberg. There are different kinds of there are different kinds of daggers for cutting, tearing, and piercing. And Mike says, I'll put my argument to an example. There's a reason executioners used great axes and big swords to decapitate people and not daggers. Weapons are not the same. No, they're not, because of their uses. And we also tend to think that weapons are, we tend to discount the skill in a weapon. Like, you could teach people, you could can you teach 10,000 people to use a simple weapon faster than you could teach 10 people a complex weapon like a Kusarigama or something, or a three sectional staff, right? And it's like, well, is it just because it's difficult to learn that makes it a terrible weapon or a great weapon? Is an executioner excellent at cutting heads off when they're stationary? Well, it's good at cutting things, but and then you get into all kinds of, like, weird rabbit holes about stuff too. Dante says the best way to differentiate weapons is to go to vitality and wound system, in my humble opinion. Yep, and then of course you can. What ends up happening in role playing games is we throw all that out the window, and then what you just do is start attaching weapons to, like, I have a weapon, and here's a list of, like, abilities that weapon has, and then you start attaching those tags, and then you get rid of. You don't have to have, like, a friggin' list of every single weapon. What you do is you have a PC picks a weapon, whatever they want, and then it has certain things. I know it would sound ridiculous to have a dagger do bludgeoning damage, but whatever. PCs are crazy. Getting to the last of reskinning and reflavoring when it comes to attacks and special abilities. Um, One other thing to do when you are reskinning is to use, how to explain this, to use weaknesses as the strengths of the monsters that are being used in your world. So some monsters, you could start to ramp up their effectiveness by giving them a weakness that actually makes them even more lethal. So here's an example. Um, you have in your world these strange blind dogs that, I don't know, were mutated by a wizard. And the dogs have exceptionally high, um, heightened senses, but they're blind. So they can sniff. Maybe they have a single sense that makes them very dangerous. They can smell magic. They can sense magic. They can sense living beings. They have enhanced smell. They can sense shape changers. They have heightened hearing or something like that. And so as they start to run around the world, in your world, maybe that illusion doesn't work on them because they're blind. Maybe that darkness spell or that blinding flash that hypnotic pattern that the PCs are so often used to No, it doesn't work on them because they're blind. But maybe that heightened sound means that if you start banging some pots and pans together, it confuses them or draws them somewhere. Or the rogue or and ranger in the party throws a rock, 30 feet away that draws the hounds that can hear really well to the sound. I'm looking at you, movie franchise, A Quiet Place and A Quiet Place 2, as an example, right? Maybe it can't see, but it can hear. If it can sense magic, maybe it runs towards spellcasters, but maybe it also runs towards spell effects. Hey, you want to charm the city guard? That's fine, but these magic sensing wolves might chow down on the city guard, and everyone's like, the guard was charmed. There's someone in the city, even though that guard is now dead, that kind of thing. Um, Zamar says, such as a hydra being hurt by water and thus able to know where any source of liquid is in a 60 to 120-foot radius, such as a sack of blood and flesh. Hydra being hurt by water. I don't remember. I don't know that reference there, Z. But yes, but yes, like something. Um, the creatures that are adapted to the Arctic being vulnerable to fire. The the aquatic creatures that have very little stability on land, such as maybe the alligator that runs on land to try to chomp something, the shark that jumps out of the water to try to grab a PC dangling over a ship's deck or something. But a shark on the deck of a craft, while pretty dangerous to be slapped around by, doesn't get a lot of chances to move. It's pretty much random. Panic being like on land. But yeah, I mean those kind of things, weaknesses in monsters that make them dangerous. um any kind of like a brachiation creature like gorillas and monkeys and stuff in trees might be badasses up in the tree systems. Well, no, I have to take that back because gorillas are badass on the ground too. So maybe I'm wrong. Swimming. Let's go with swimming, right? Like a lot of monkeys and gorillas and things. Shallow water, fine, but deep waters, no. They might make very terrible swimmers. So yeah, you want to battle them up in the treetops. You're not only getting pummeled and grappled, you're also getting like thrown and to the ground and having maybe a big, large monster then, excuse me, jump on top of you and start pummeling you that way. So a weakness, Medusa not being able to look at his own reflection, um, basilisks the same way, creatures that are blind, can't hear, um, distracted by certain things, giving. When I say reskinning, I mean like uh, by making a thing of its own nature act like its nature makes it real. For example, there are no particular rules for scaring off wolves, but we all know if you take a burning log and swing it around, that animalistic creatures really don't want to get burned out in the wild, right? And so if they act and behave in a manner that's appropriate to their type, let's go back to the simple ogre. Maybe an ogre from a an aberrant origin might eat brains, so maybe the ogre starts to pummel and crush its enemies, and then when one of the npcs goes down, you see the ogre's mouth open up with tendrils or something that snake into the dead victim's ears and eyes or something and mouth, and starts to like suckle out its brain as like a chunky paste, and then the pcs, between wanting to vomit, are like, we really don't want to get killed by this ogre because I don't want my brain sucked out of my head, right? Essentially, once you have finished reskinning and you can establish its behavior and reskin the behavior of the thing. In Star Wars, there was the Wampa, and it knocked Luke Skywalker in the head, dragged him into the cave. We don't know how it melted the ice in the ceiling, but probably breathed on it, maybe stuck his feet up there to use them for a meal later on, in which case he felt like he needed a snack and came back. But we were already given an example of the the I was going to say culture, um, of its nature, right? Apparently, it finds things out there and then likes to stick them up in the ceiling for food later on. So Mars' example of reskinning, before we get out of here, example reskin by flipping what is usually there, such as a hydra being located in lakes and water, and then giving it a disadvantage and advantage from it. Of course, like it's you want to fight the Loch Ness monster in a lake, you're probably dead. You want to got it to trick it to come on land. Okay, all right, then then we're going somewhere, right? Um, John Andrew says, I love giving monsters and NPCs class levels, class features, feats, spells. Fun for me, something new and challenging for the players. I wish how easy it would have been to give a, either in this or the monster book, to give a truncated, like, you could even do it tier level, like truncated class abilities, spells, and features that you can layer onto monsters, right? So every class, bardic ability. So this creature uh, um, enhances the abilities of creatures around it, like a an orc chieftain gives an inspiration to its troops. Get rid of the orc chieftain, it loses the inspiration effect, right? These creatures have enragement, right? Don't call it rage, call it aggression, or I don't know, bloodthirst or something, and it has a rage like ability that you could just, like, three or four lines of dialogue, three or four lines of text. Layer this onto the creature. That creature has that thing. I mean, they could have very easily done that, but again, monster books make money, so yeah. Uh, JB says just changing a creature's size does a lot too. A young dragon described as being huge or 3 by 3 square or gargantuan 4 by 4 square instantly has players shaking in their boots. Yeah, I talked about size changes, and not just size change, but reach changes and size in terms of shape changes, like a long snake or a 10-foot reach or tentacles that reach even further, right? Like reach changes, length and width changes in a creature. Um, uh, those size changes could affect its ability to do a thing. So, for example, a hydra on the ground might be able to get to the third floor of a building, right, or a tower with its necks and heads, but maybe it can't do that with its claws, right? Like a dragon's tail may have a lot more range than its forward claws or something. Mike says, I'm inspired to make an aberrant ogre. Thick tentacles for arms, rubbery purple flesh. Yep. Missing a head, vertical mouth in the chest. Yeah. 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 Um, the uh the the monster with no eyes but just a big giant maw, like lamprey maw for its face, is always scary. Or the big maw in its chest area. It's like, I'm gonna strike it with my sword. Great. It opens up its stomach and swallows your forearm. It's like, oh no. All right, HR Geiger. He's got hands on its orifices. He hasn't got a head. Yeah, yeah. Song by the, oh, I didn't know, song by the H.P. Lovecraft Society. I didn't know there was a song. Well, you got to make Cthulhu songs. They're fun. Mm-mm-mm-mm. Mice is getting back to the folk horror elements. Lycanthropes might be a result of cursed druids. Their wild shape becomes a curse. You have to find and bless their circle to break the curse chain. I absolutely have made plenty of links between, like, lycanthropes, shape changers, druids, links between, say, doppelgangers and mimics and the various other shape changed monstrous things out there. Like, heck, you could reskin a monster by making it bits and pieces of yet another different type of monster. Um, we've seen the purple worm sliced open that releases oozes or smaller versions of itself. The spider that carries tiny spiders on its back, so it's a giant spider with, like, I don't know, one or more spider swarms hanging around on its back. There's the monster that vomits up other monsters. That's more BFF thinking, but maybe you have a troll that's got wounds on it, and when you cut the troll, maybe it's got acid blood or it spills out, I don't know, maggot like things on its body that might grow into other trolls, or maybe that troll ate something it maybe shouldn't have. There's all kinds of ways you can like take and reformat. Constructs can be really good for this, where a construct has other constructs on its back and its arms, or it opens up its chest and releases other things out of it. So not quite reskinning, but recontextualizing what a thing is. Mike says I've reskinned fiends a lot. Yeah, yeah, fiends, any devils, demons, daemons, Salati. You could reskin plenty of those. Anyway, the Bound was a chained devil, mummified in chains, who walked about on chained tentacles like Doctor Octopus. It terrified my players. That's awesome. That is really great. I like that. Yeah. I made a beholder that was like that, where it's instead of eye stalks. It was a powered down beholder that was an eye, but instead of eye stalks, they were eye tentacles. And in order to use an eye stalk, it had to lift a tentacle up with an eyeball on the end. And so the players knew that it could only lift up like two tentacles at a time because they had to walk on the rest of them. And it was like a random roll and stuff like that. It was, anyways, kind of cool. Mufa said I had something in a game called a witching tree, which was a result of a dryad who severed her connection to her tree and became a greater fae. Ooh. And there's also plenty of other things we can do with that. Like the dryad connected to a tree, the tree's alive, maybe it's a treant. Like you said, you did it the opposite, not opposite way, but a divergent part of that where it severed its connection to its tree. So there are plenty of ways we can layer and stack and um, people, a great battle, people killed on the battlefield, instead of them just becoming skeletons or zombies, maybe they become ghosts, maybe they animate or um, mutate the landscape around it. Maybe the dryads that were pushed out of the forest cause a mutation in the forest in the first place, so you start coming up with other things. There's other ways to do limitations that make something dangerous, like trees that can't move, but then you reskin them as something else. Like you could take an aboleth and turn that into a tree that has roots and doesn't breathe water, and you don't call it an aboleth, and its tentacles are like roots or vines or something or whatever. All that kind of stuff, right? Yeah. Dead Man says the black troll could be a troll that is immune to acid attacks and can vomit forth an acid attack itself. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. And oh, guess what? When it's dark, maybe it's got some kind of camouflage. Maybe players that are killed by it cannot be resurrected because their body has burned. Don't drop to 0 hit points. You're probably going to keep burning and dying, right? Like you could start adding that, adding a lot of those little layers onto a thing to make a thing far more dangerous. And like you said, it's immune to acid. So maybe that's one way. Like you make it little bit more dangerous than the rest of the regular trolls, and everyone's like, "Oh shit!" Ooh. In my game, I did a dirty thing where I had um, villagers had burns. The PCs knew that the dragon was black. They think they're fighting a black dragon, and come to find out that it was a red dragon covered in soot. And it was dirty of me, but it was my way of going like, everyone keeps telling you to keep getting burns, and the PCs are just assuming, oh, it's a black dragon. We all know the meta of it. Yes, it spits acid. They prepped for acid, and this thing breathes out fire. So was that a dirty dog of me? Yeah, it was, because they ripped me a new one, and I was like, yeah, you're right. But the point is that even context can change a thing, right? Like just because dragons are blue doesn't mean they always have to be in deserts. Just because red dragons are red doesn't mean they always have to be in volcanoes. Maybe there's some reason why a particular type of monster isn't in its normal habitat, and then the PCs can be surprised by a thing, you know. I think I know what I mean. Mike says a hag had an undead treant as a hag vehicle. Yeah, it was a hanging tree with a treehouse. Hell's yeah! Zombies hung from the nooses. Yet the treant could throw the zombies. Hell's yes! Yeah. A hanging tree with a hag like Baba Yaga style hut up in the tree. Errant NPCs hung from the tree, ready to be reanimated. Zombies walking around with nooses around its neck. I love that kind of stuff. I love it. I've run an Aliens episode using Ankhags. Ank Ankheg's unsung heroes, I think, of unused. It was a full Ankheg hive with reskinned giant centipedes as Ankheg nymphs and reskinned black dragon as the queen. Perfect, 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 perfect. Yep. Yeah. Absolutely. Reskin a dragon into something else. They make perfect reskinnable like boss monster type of things. They have a ranged attack. They are physically tough. They're very brilliant, and reskinning them as an insect, something non-lizard like, an insect, a beast, a the psychic embodiment of a wizard, right? Like maybe a wizard becomes its final form by ripping its skin off or casting a spell that transforms it into this acid spewing, black skinned humanoid thing with wings and a lashing tail or a whip or something. And you're just like, oh, I'm just going to use a black dragon's stats, right? And maybe it doesn't breathe acid. Maybe it's got one of its hands like uh opens up and it sprays acid out of its hand. It looks more like demonic or whatever. I don't know. Whatever. Pulled that out my ass. My Z says, I love that. Reminds you of my male ettercaps who carried spider eggs on their backs. Yep. And threw them at PCs, spawning spider swarms or young male ettercaps. Yep. I like the ettercap. I kind of like that. And like Mike says, the whole campaign was hag, body horror, insect theme. Pick a theme and run with it, and just start grabbing random, not random, but like random in the sense of monsters that wouldn't normally fit, but bring them into the world. Right? You can make anything. For example, you can make just about anything centaurian, like an ogre with the lower from the waist down some other monster, spiders, snake, um, leopard, zebra, right? Yep. Yeah, it's getting late. Yeah. Perfect way to get out of here, guys. Thank you so much for being part of the show. I got to make a new exit video. But guys, thank you very much. Tomorrow, I did post a little link up into the just to tell everybody what the schedule's going to be. So Monday's going to be Monster Monday. Tuesdays are going to be Level Up Fifth Edition. A bunch of people found the channel. Uh, the community is looking for alternates to Fifth Edition while still playing using their same materials that they've purchased and supporting third party publishers because I helped and was part of the writing in the Treasures, Trials, and Treasures book. I have I'm kind of an ambassador for fifth edition because they paid me to do a thing. So Tuesdays are going to be fifth edition. This also gives you the opportunity to like not tune in if it's not your cup of tea, because your time is valuable and you can spend it anywhere. So Tuesday is going to be level up fifth advanced fifth edition. Wednesdays will be world building Wednesday, where we are going to collectively world build. A hint: it's going to be like a 21 D12 tables used in something called GTFO, or basically going too far off the map. We're going to basically take something and go too far off. Yes, I know it also stands for get the whatever, but we're going to take something and go too far with it. We're going to take spells, primarily spells and monsters, maybe some class types or whatever features, and stretch it to its limits. Like take it too far. Are we going to do the portable hole with the bag of holding trick? Yeah, we're going to do that. We're not just going to do that. We're going to make a society that's built around these things. Are we going to take Blink Monsters and Shadow Cats because we can't use Displacer Beasts? Oops, sorry. Ooh. Yeah. Are we going to take the Light Spell and Guidance Spell? Are we going to take Cure Wounds and Goodberry? Are we going to Floating Disc? Are we take these and build a society around these things, like a place to play, a weird thing that's so far out there that it's only heard of in rumor? Yeah, that's what we're going to do on Wednesdays. Third Pillar Thursdays coming back. Third Pillar of Exploration. That's my jam. That's my thing. That's what I'm known for. And then, of course, Future Friday. Future Friday, this Friday, we're going to do a mothership supplement called Dive. It's taking the mothership rules. I didn't do this as a. We're going to look a little bit at mothership and then go into a supplement written by someone that's available on Drive Through RPG. That's basically mothership in the deep ocean, coastal, aquatic kind of thing. Kind of cool. So we'll do that. So again, Monster Monday, Level Up 5e Tuesday, World Building Wednesday, Third Pillar of Exploration Thursday, and Future Friday. So we're going back to that. Eventually, the entire week will link together. This week kind of doesn't, but you guys know, you get the point. So guys, anybody? Oh man. Yeah, thank you. River, love with your heart, and for everything else, skin it, replace it with your own skin. I don't know if that's a good thing. Although I like the chicken skin, but that's all right. Yeah, I do need another outro sequence. I have to make one. I have to. I was going to commission one on Fiverr, but I was like, I'm not paying that. I'll just make one on my own. I'm not that good, but yeah. Yeah. Anyway, guys, have a great one. I will see you later. Bye. Got to head off to work. Peace.